Warning, Kino.
Sorry if it smells. I stepped in dog poop yesterday with both feet, and I have not had the chance to clean my shoes yet. It somehow got through my shoes and onto my socks, so it would be pointless to take my shoes off.
It's a freestyle. We're getting up tonight, with the boys. It's a party. We're getting it started. We're doing crazy. We're doing blow, like we're in the movie Blow. And I would be Johnny Depp. You're gay. You're gay. You like John's erect.
Here I'm just saying, like, I'm Johnny Depp. You're gay. You're gay because you like John's erect, which means like you like hard boners.
Say what's next. I'm the best. You can't object. I'm huffing queefs for the effects. Yeah. I'm famous. If there was I'm going off. I'm jacking off. If there was a Hall of Fame for jacking off, I'd be in it. First ballot, give me the gold jacket. Can't come when I'm having sex, only from jacking off because I'm a porn addict. I hump like a rabbit.
Did you go in my bedroom and go through all my stuff?
What?
All my drawers are open. My prescription bottles are empty. You're not gonna say anything? Empty your pockets.
I didn't go in your room.
Angus said he saw you go in.
Dude, never fucking talk to me again.
Empty your pockets.
Yeah, so this is when Angus completely fucked me. He went behind my back and he told Elise that I went into her room, which I did, but he just betrayed me. He betrayed my trust and he ruined our friendship. And I continued lying after this because I was embarrassed.
There's nothing in my pockets.
Empty them.
There's nothing in my pockets. Gum and...
I mean, can you tell
There's
me?
nothing in my pockets.
Your jacket pocket.
Fuck you.
Can you empty your pockets?
Judas. We're not friends anymore, by the way.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Empty your jacket pockets, please.
Okay.
Those are from probably something else.
Okay. Are you kidding me? Those are my antibiotics. So did you take, how many did you take? Are you serious?
I had just been caught red-handed with all of Elise's antibiotics. It didn't feel like a party anymore. It felt like my closest friends were all against me and hated me.
Pick this shit up,
All right.
dude.
Fuck you. Help me.
No!
No one's gonna help you.
Cool, I lost all my friends tonight. That's awesome. Can I connect to your Bluetooth?
No,
You
stop.
got your fucking mind?
Enough.
I'd have to pull over if you want to connect to Bluetooth.
Whoa.
Happy birthday, dear Elise.
Elise, could you turn your Bluetooth off so I can connect this?
Liam, you need to leave, dude.
Oh, what's up, Judas? Hey, catch.
Did you know that after Judas betrayed Jesus, he killed himself? He couldn't live with himself. He couldn't live with the guilt. So he hung himself with a rope.
I'm gonna keep breaking shit. I can't connect to this Bluetooth. I think you're connected.
He was cracking bottles and rapping a lot. And
Elise,
I'm just like,
I'm not saying anyone stole it. I can't find my phone.
That's the guy.
Sure.
I'm not.
That's the guy.
Right where you are
Yeah,
right now.
why? There's no problem.
Okay.
No problem.
That's good.
Whoa, was she have a knife or
All
something?
right, hands behind your back. What the fuck? All right, look,
No.
you have the right to remain silent.
No, kill me.
I give up. Just kill me. I give up.
Anything you
Kill
say
me now.
can and will be used against you.
Kill
Just let
me now.
Kill me now.
finish
Come on,
the thing I have to say.
come on.
I read the suspect his Miranda rights. I repeatedly asked him to stop resisting. He did not comply. So I had to use physical force to subdue and restrain him.
Yeah, pretty much. I assaulted one of the officers, tried to sprint away, tripped on the front doorstep, fell, tried to crawl away. Cop got on me. I was like, kill me, because I knew it was over. I was like, I'm worthless, kill me. I'm nothing, kill me. Nobody would care if I died, kill me. Yeah, I was just begging them to kill me.
Okay, thanks for all of that. Yeah, I think we're good.
Cool. When does this come out?
Yeah, this is me checking out some new products from our new favorite sponsor, Dollar Shave Club. Not gonna lie, I thought Dollar Shave Club just made razors, but they don't. They make a ton of really, really awesome items, products and items. Personally, I always keep some extra razor blades on me. You never know. Boom, right there. Fits my pockets. Double bearded, clean shaven mountain man. Dollar Shave Club is for every type of body, for every type of shave. Whatever you shave, welcome to the club. You're in the club. You're in the Dollar Shave Club. Congratulations. Congrats. It's the best day of your life. You just hit the lottery. But don't just take our word for it. Try it yourself, okay? Dollar Shave Club products are available at Amazon, your favorite retailer near you. Also, you can visit their site right now to get 20% off an order of $20 or more shipped right to your door. Visit Dollar Shave Club /AlmostFridayTV and use promo code Friday for 20% off an order of $20 or more. Welcome to the club.
Welcome. This is 6 years old. Has Hassan said anything retarded about Ukraine? I don't know if my heart can handle it. Oh, hold on. We have other Hassan hate watch clips.
Off Left's ideal relationship is with Hassan Piker. The relationship
Okay, fair.
Off Left actually gets is with Hassan Piker's chair. Lib Left's ideal
Wait, is this recently?
You know what's really funny about this?
He's really gonna get that mad over that? Holy shit.
This motherfucker knows, as a person who has been in this community for years, he knows that I pause every fucking time. The original meme that went super viral was him knowing that I would fucking pause and being like, thanks for unpausing the video, Hassan. But now, after years and years of fucking Reactgate nonsense, I mean, it's fine. It's whatever. He cooked me. Yeah, I always just let the chair do the talking for me. The original meme is how I came across you. I know. For those of you who don't know, this is the original
I'm trying to learn
meme.
yoga myself, you know. Yeah, okay, buddy. And I'm a tier 3 sub to Hassan for his political views. And we're back.
I'm sorry, what? Son of a bitch. Yeah, back then he cooked me famously for, holy shit, this is 3 million views. Because he cooked me because he knew that I used to pause all of my videos and talk for fucking 8 hours on the videos, and now he's turned around and is memeing on me saying I always leave the videos running with my chair.
Relationship is an open marriage in a humble off-grid cottage.
Or sorry, 1 million. Fuck my dyslexia. 1 million views 3 years ago.
Cottage near a scenic mountainside where they grow their own food and make their own clothes for a small, like-minded community. This doesn't happen because Lib Left doesn't have the millions of dollars it requires for a Hollywood aesthetic hobby farm. Lib Right.
He unfollowed. Yeah, maybe he was a tier 3 sub. He unfollowed. Yeah, maybe he doesn't like me no more because I fucking steal from YouTubers or something. I don't know.
This ideal relationship is being an 85-year-old billionaire with an harem of Instagram baddies on his mega yacht in Dubai. Haters will criticize such a transactional relationship, but while Lib Right knows that girls only like him for his money, he knows they love him for his terminal heart.
Wait, was that ironic, the tier 3 thing? I don't know, but you can't like make any kind of jokes like that against Hassan. He'll start like spam texting you and everything. We've seen it happen over and over again, right? Where he was texting, I think he did it to Nick Pollum. He did it to Ludwig. He made him take down a video when he made a joke and rehost it without the joke. Like, yeah, he's very, very, very sensitive. It's probably even harder for this guy because it's a YouTube video and it's a guy who's not his close friend, so he can't like control him. Rip. That guy probably casually explained, yeah, I got brainwashed by Destiny. True. Why is it? Oh, I thought these were rocks. This is the dumbest. What? This is fucking. What a horrible ad. I'm never buying whatever shit this is. Cloud Surfer 2. Oh my god, what?
Oi, país.
Hello, guinea pig. 用中文怎么说？Can 就说 cat as well. Is it okay? No. 没关系吧？
没关系。
哎呀。
Sophie.
Sophie. Yeah. Sophie. Yeah. 没关系吧？
Oh my goodness. TSLA, Tesla showrooms assaulted. Oh. Wait, am I crazy? The intro to this video, it looked like an FPS where this is like a pistol and the guy's like coming into Jesus. But okay, I see. Okay, we need to work on our cheers here, guys. Oh, they even brought a snare drummer? Oh my goodness. Companion, now available on digital. Why does this look like an AI girlfriend ad? Holy shit. It probably is, true. Another funny meme from Hassan's reaction to that video.
Trap card is the moral high ground. Their weakness is, how's your relationship with your parents? Auth Left's trap card is pretending to be lib left. Their weakness is trigger words like America is a decent country or Mazel Tov.
Oh no, true. Oh shit.
Oh, wait, what? Oh, come on, dude. Mazel Tov. The first one was good. Like, America's a decent country is definitely a... But Mazel Tov is like, yeah, okay. Every Marxist-Leninist is a anti-Semite. It's just like, yeah, okay. They're anti-Israel, so they're obviously anti-Semitic. That's crazy.
The Bolsheviks, well known for their tolerance of the Jews.
It worked? What do you mean?
Country or Mazel Tov. Lib Right's trap card is the success of free market capitalism. Their weakness is how much tax have you paid in capital gains. Auth Right's trap card is their collection of cherry-picked crime statistics. Their weakness is undermining their credibility with questions like dinosaurs. Were they real or just the shape of nuggets? This scares Auth Right because they know
I need to go to the restroom. And then we'll watch this Ethan Klein thing. Here, one sec.
Be Lex Fridman, the one-man question-asking machine. Literally wake up pondering the meaning of life. Sip kombucha while contemplating consciousness during breakfast. Scroll through Twitter. What's the meaning of this tweet? Blocked. Tesla tries to recruit. But nah, gotta ask people about love and stuff. Head to Podcast Studio, the Temple of Inquiry. Walls covered in existential questions written in the ink of Joe Rogan's third eye. Get bored. Unblock someone from Twitter just to block them again. The cycle of life and death. Blocking algorithms so tight, people think it's the next Bitcoin. Bro, open source your blocking algo. Please, bro. You don't understand, bro. Just open source it, bro. Bring on Elon, Naval, and some 4D chess grandmaster. What is love but an algorithm of the soul? Ring. Echo mind-blown ampersand pseudo system. CTL restart simulation dot service. Tweet out, what's the nature of tweeting? Block a few more anons. Joe Rogan nods approvingly in a parallel universe. Deepfake myself just to ask deeper questions. Go to bed in a Faraday cage to protect those valuable thoughts. Dream in recursive, self-improving algorithms. Wake up in a cold sweat, eyes wider than when I ask about love. My feel when just had an existential nightmare about the universe being a neural net trained by Elon. Dreams are now blocked. 403 forbidden. Yeet on a 10K run at 4 a.m., chased by philosophical dilemmas.
Ooh. What is the Donald Trump doctrine?
I don't like how this guy's always leaning forward. It makes me uncomfortable. Okay.
What is Donald Trump's foreign policy? I think the place to begin to try to
Do you think he uses a digital blurring around here, or do you think his f-stop is set so low that he's actually like just focusing the front of his face so that his and leaning forward enough that he's blurry behind him?
tangle what we've actually seen here is to listen to the way Donald Trump and Vice President Vance speak about our allies.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within. The retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
I've had very good talks with Putin, and I've had not such good talks with Ukraine. They don't have any cards, but they play it tough.
Something is new here. This is not even what Donald Trump's first term was like. There were hints of it. But something is new here. I wanted to have a bigger picture conversation about what this Trump doctrine is and the way it's going to reshape the world. So I'm joined today by Fareed Zakaria, the host of GPS on CNN, a Washington Post columnist, and the author of the best-selling book, Age of Revolutions. As always, my email, EzraKleinShow@nytimes.com. Fareed Zakaria, welcome back to the show.
Always a pleasure, Ezra.
So, to the extent you feel you can define it, what's the Trump doctrine?
You know, the part of the problem with Trump is he's so mercurial, he's so idiosyncratic, that just when you think you figured out the Trump doctrine, he goes and says something that kind of sounds like the opposite of the Trump doctrine. But I do think that there's one coherent worldview that Trump seems to espouse and has espoused for a long time. The first ad he took out when he was a real estate developer, I think it was in 1985, was an ad about how Japan was ripping us off economically and Europe was ripping us off by free riding on security. And what that represents, I think, fundamentally is a kind of rejection of the open international system that the United States and Europe has built over the last 8 decades. If you think about it for a minute, it really is a remarkable achievement. You go back to international relations before 1945, and it's just constant war, mercantilism, protectionism. The 2 Yale scholars who tabulate...
Maybe they'll get into this, but I feel like he's reading this at way too high of a level. I feel like the most basic explanation for how Trump views the world is that there is a winner and a loser on every side of a deal. 2 people cannot mutually benefit from any economic agreement. So if they're winning, we must be losing. That's what it feels like Trump's... That fundamental misunderstanding of economics and everything seems to inform every decision that Trump makes, or at least all of the conversations he has, but...
In the 100 years before World War II, there's about 150 territorial conquests, aggression, taking...
we'll do the cabinet meeting next, sure. And then I'll probably try to read a lot today. Maybe we could do 2 chapters, because I've been
of territory, legitimization of that. Since 1945, there have been practically none. You have an open international economy. You have free trade. You have taking of territory, legitimization of that. Since 1945, there have been practically none. You have an open international economy. You have free trade. You have rules. You have trade and travel and, patents. I mean, there's a huge area of kind of international cooperation that people don't think about, but that happens all the time, every day, when you fly, when goods go from one place to another. And what Trump, I think, has taken from that whole world is the U.S. has been the sucker. The U.S. has been the country that's had to underwrite it. The U.S. is the country that's opened itself up to the world, and everyone takes advantage of the U.S. So I don't know that he wants to tear it down, but he wants to seriously renegotiate or perhaps even redo that system.
Let me try to reflect what his people tell me, picking up on something you said. There is this, as people call it, rules-based international order. And the thing that Joe Biden says, and Jake Sullivan says, and Fareed Zakaria says, is that America benefits from that order and benefits from being part of that order. And there's long been a critique from the left that America, in fact, dominates that order and doesn't play by its rules. We break international law. We do the things we want to do and then use those rules on others when we don't like what they're doing. But the critique from Trump is that that's not true. That of every country, America, as the strongest, is harmed the most by these restraints, by these rules, by these laws, because we have so much leverage we could be using. We could stop tariffs on anybody for any reason and get them to do what we want. We have the strongest military of all of the militaries. Everybody wants to be on our side and everybody fears being on our bad side. And that what Trump is doing is systematically searching out the strength America has, the ways we can wield our weight and leverage, and untying our hands from behind our back.
Yeah, there is a certain truth to that, that the United States does have enormous power. By the way, they're even right about the fact that the United States is more open to, for example, the world's goods and services than they are to ours. The United States has long practiced a kind of asymmetrical free trade. So after World War II, we decided we would open up our markets to Europe and East Asia, to Japan and South Korea. And the reason we did that was we were trying to build an international system where everyone benefited, where there really wasn't that feeling of beggar thy neighbor, zero-sum game, where everyone went into a competitive spiral, which then ends up in nationalism and war. We were trying to build something different, and we thought, we can be a little generous here. Let's let everyone grow, and we'll do fine in the process. And of course, Europe and Japan and South Korea and places like that grew, but the United States absolutely dominated the world. Because it's a classic positive sum game. We created a much larger global economy, much larger trading system, huge capital flows, and we were at the center of it. The dollar was the reserve currency of the world, which alone gives us incredible advantages. We're the only country that doesn't have to worry that much about, debt.
Wait, I can't tell if Bill Dozer is trolling or... I'm still something for desperate anyone to explain how a multi-billionaire trade deficit with Canada, subsidizing them in essence, leading to a huge U.S. national debt, is somehow a good thing. I don't think a trade deficit has anything to do with the government borrowing to spend money on anything. There might be a really, really, really roundabout way that those connect, but I'm unaware of it if it is.
Deficits because we know that at the end of the day the dollar is the reserve currency. And my feeling is if you take that system and say, okay, we're going to look at each bilateral relationship and see if we can squeeze this country for a slightly better deal, you probably will get a better deal. But two things will happen. The first thing is you will end up fracturing your alliances because the people with whom you have the most leverage are your allies. You know, we have more leverage with Canada than we have with Russia because Canada depends on us for security. Canada trades with us a lot. Its economy is intricately tied to the U.S. economy. So you can bully Canada. You can't really bully Russia that much because we don't do much trade with them. You can't bully China. Even China, it's another vast continental economy that can survive just fine. So the result of Trump in action, the Trump Doctrine in action, has been a war on America's allies. But the second more important part is, yeah, you'll gain a little bit here and there by getting slightly better tariff deals. And just so people understand, tariffs in the industrialized world are around 3%. They're very, very low. So the idea, you know, we're not getting penalized in any large ways. You can pick a few, you can cherry pick a few examples to the contrary, but mostly among the liberal democratic states of the world, it's a free trade world. But what you will do by squeezing each of these individual countries, humiliating them, making them, forcing them to accept renegotiation of terms, you lose the kind of relationships that you had built over 8 decades that created this extraordinary anchor of stability in the world, which was the Western Alliance. And, you know, the gains are not that great.
Let's talk about the tariffs for a minute. This is one of the places where the policy and practices just seemed incoherent to me. And I think I need to do a whole episode on this, but there were different goals that have been articulated for tariffs. One is you impose significant, steady tariffs for a long period of time because you're trying to make manufacturers make different...
But why bully the EU? It's also a massive economy. I think when he's saying bully, he doesn't necessarily mean like we can fuck with these guys and bully them. What he means is that like we have a hugely mutually beneficial relationship, so we can like ask for things and probably get it, and vice versa. That's why it's good to be friends with people, right? Like I could get, you know, my mom or my dad or a brother or a sister or a friend or a girlfriend, like to do more things mutually beneficial than I could a person who I fucking hate that I've made like my mortal enemy, right? There's no leverage there. You have no pre-existing healthy relationship. You have no pre-existing healthy business. It's always good to have friends because you have more leverage over them. This is one of the reasons why it was so stupid for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union. They lost all their leverage. They have no vote now. Now, if Great Britain, or I'm sorry, if the United Kingdom doesn't like something the European Union is doing, they can kick rocks. They have no influence anymore, except for whatever they negotiate in a trade deal. Whereas before, they were a member of the European Parliament and had a seat on the European Commission, right? Commission. And now they have that none. They have none of that anymore. Same thing with the U.S. leaving the WHO.
Decisions about where to locate factories, right? You're trying to onshore supply chains. To do that, you have to have them, these corporations, expecting tariffs for quite a while, and then you hope that they will respond to those tariffs by insourcing into America. Another is that we're going to use the tariffs to raise a lot of revenue. That too requires the imposition over a long period of time of significant tariffs. Another is we're just going to bully small nations and just bully kind of anybody we might feel like bullying, right? The tariffs are an all-purpose tool to get other countries to do anything we want them to do. We've sort of been using them that way, but not for very significant concessions. We're on the cusp of maybe they're about to reintroduce them to Canada and Mexico, so we'll see where we are in a couple of weeks. But what are they doing, man?
So there are two things I think are going on. One is, as I've said, Trump, if he has a worldview, he's a protectionist. He's always felt that, you know, you want to protect American industries. These foreigners come in and they take advantage of us, et cetera, et cetera. The second, I think, is that, and this I think he discovered as president, the president has
Why is our audio fucked up? Too many old people.
Incredible power in the area of tariffs. Technically, it's meant to be Congress that imposes tariffs, but long ago, Congress delegated that power to the president. And I think Trump loves that. It is an extraordinary unilateral...
Fuck, I'd have to go and look up that more. I don't think that Congress delegated tariffs to the president. I think that what happened was that there was either a Supreme Court interpretation or Congress gave the president the ability to do tariffs for like national security reasons. But now the president can just declare anything in national security and then tariff. I think that's more what happened. Although in effect, he's kind of right. Like it's easy or arbitrary to declare anything a national emergency and then tariff afterwards. But
exercise of huge American power, the power of the American market, to say, I will just block you from being able to participate in the American market. And you saw him do that in the case of the Colombian president. So I think, he's not sure. At one hand, he loves wielding this weapon. On the other hand, he is something of a protectionist. But as you say, he notices that markets don't seem to like it. So where will it all end up? My gut is that what happens is, tariffs in the industrialized world, as I said, have roughly been about 3%. If you assume all of Trump's tariffs are actually put in place, I think it goes up to about 6%. And if that stays, which is a big if, other countries will all retaliate. This is an area where I think, we do live it's not even a bipolar world, it's a tripolar world. The Europeans and the Chinese are very powerful, and the Europeans on this issue speak with one voice. So they will put on reciprocal tariffs. The Chinese will put on reciprocal tariffs. We end up in a world with more tariffs, more protection. Look, I'm an old-fashioned free trader. I think the whole thing is a disaster. I think that it is a complete misreading of the last 30 or 40 years of economics. J.E. Vance, when he was in Germany, in Europe, one of the few backhanded compliments he played to Germany was, he said, at least the Germans didn't go along with this Washington consensus nonsense and they protected their manufacturing, which is partly true. They didn't protect it through tariffs, by the way. They protected it by just having very strong apprenticeship programs and what we would call, community college type stuff. But look at where Germany...
Does that count as protectionism? Oh.
Yes. Germany, the third, fourth largest economy in the world, is stuck in the second industrial revolution. What do they make? Cars, chemicals, machine tools. They don't have any industry in the digital economy. The entire digital economy is totally dominated by the U.S. Why is that? Because we allowed ourselves to transition to where the frontiers of the economy were. This whole idea of trying to hold on to, the 19th century or the 1920s, it doesn't work. It's incredibly expensive.
This is so true, but it's impossible to communicate this without people thinking you're being an elitist, I guess, or you're being derogatory towards blue-collar labor, which, I don't know, is childish. But I feel like people took that, I've never read the book, but the bullshit jobs thing, and I feel like people think that every job that doesn't involve building an actual physical thing is like a bullshit job. And that's why I hear people saying this, like, America needs to go back to manufacturing things again. We need to make real stuff again. And it's like, I'm sorry, you think digital stuff like isn't real? Like that doesn't have... Like, that's not like the most in-demand shit in the entire fucking world? What do you like our lives are centered around digital stuff right now, and you'd rather just go back to manufacturing widgets? Why? Like, it's stupid, childlike.
Nobody has been able to do it. Manufacturing employment today, after Donald Trump's 4 years and Joe Biden's 4 years, is the same as it was roughly 10, 15 years ago. I think that this whole obsession
going back to the past
is fundamentally misconceived. What we should do is much more redistribution so that the people who lose out in these periods of technological change are taken care of.
True.
But the idea that we can go back to 1950 is just nuts.
This gets to me, one of the real obfuscations of the Trump presidency, of MAGA as a movement. There are a lot of conversations right now that have a term in them that is ill-defined, let's call it. Efficiency, right? What is the Department of Government efficiency about? What is efficiency? Efficiency of what? Towards what, right? Efficiency require some other defined ends to be a coherent goal. But here too, what is America first? What would it mean for that to be successful? What are we looking like? The trade deficit is going to be the main output of our foreign policy, which, by the way, he's not consistent on in any way. He was talking the other day about building a renewed Keystone XL pipeline to Canada, which, if we start importing a bunch of Canadian oil, that's going to increase the trade deficit with Canada. Is it manufacturing employment? Is that what we're supposed to be targeting here? Is if America...
Do you think there's any industries or product in America where it would be viable to have short supply chains or whatever the term is? Maybe, but we're not ready to have that conversation. The problem is conservatives aren't honest about what they feel about it. Like, if you want to say that some supply chain should be protected in America for national security reasons, then there's a good reason to do that. But conservatives don't have that conversation. They just think for some reason it's better for our economy, which is not true. And if that's where you're at in the conversation, then you're wrong and you shouldn't be listened to. So, and conservatives aren't ready to have that conversation because they're delusionally thinking that if we just make every single thing that we use at every part of our supply chain in the United States, that somehow it makes our economy better, when it would be catastrophic to our economy.
America first was working, it would be manufacturing and playing. Is it GDP growth? I have never heard them, and I have listened fairly closely, describe what this new era, this new golden age of American strength is. Is it median wages for men? They don't, I think, they still have not articulated a coherent view of American power or success. Like, is America stronger if AFD takes over Germany? Why? Like, what does AFD get us? I'm curious how you think about this. If maybe I'm being unfair, maybe you think there's a better definition of it, but there is a question in all this of what they're trying to achieve. Do you feel like you know?
I would guess that America first for Trump and for many of his followers, and again, I wouldn't put, some of the ideologists of MAGA in the same category, but I think for Trump, it's the idea that the United States has been constrained for too long by globalism, by worrying about the international environment, by worrying about all these alliances, constrained by these international organizations, that again, we've been the sucker. That what America first means is we're going to break through all that bullshit and we're just going to do what's good for America. But what is left undefined, as you're saying, is, well, what is good for America? Why would it be good for America to break apart the international trading system? Why would it be good for America to break apart this world it's created? So that part, I think, is...
I think another kind of bullshit that's exposed for the ideologies is like, why the fuck would Trump and Musk, why would they support like the AFD or any of these right-leaning movements in these other countries, right? Like, let's assume that liberals are suckers and that liberals are causing their countries to lose out on trade deals. Wouldn't we want Europe to have those parties in power? If it is the case that like these far-right parties are so much better at negotiating for their people, well, we wouldn't want them to be in charge. We don't want to negotiate against those people. Wouldn't we want to negotiate against like the soft, squishy liberal? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it's all bullshit.
It's undefined, but you can see the impulse and what the attraction is to a lot of people. A lot of people who have always felt that the United States, by the way, run by this elite cabal of urban, liberals, overeducated urban liberals in places like New York and Washington, has been selling America out. This was basically, if you think of the 1950s, this was the McCarthy attack in many ways. So I think in some ways it's a hearkening back to that idea.
There's another piece of that, being restrained by norms. I think a pretty significant difference between Trump's first term and his second is the intensity of his fascination now with territorial expansion, making Canada the 51st state, making Gaza a province somehow of America, taking over Greenland. But I think Trump believes, and the people around him believe, that the norms of the world turned against territorial expansion in a way that was bad for America. America in the 19th century expanded. Other countries did too. And we are powerful, and there are things we should want. That Canada should be the 51st state, or at least it should act like a vassal state of America. That if we want Greenland, we should have it. I think Trump really fundamentally wants, the land mass of America to be larger when he leaves office than when he came in. How have you taken Trump's renewed interest in...
Wish you and Vosh would collab on certain issues like Ukraine and Russia. His position seems correct. Hey, listen, if he's willing to publicly acknowledge what he said, then sure. But I don't even know if Vosh wants to collab with anybody anymore.
Gaining territory.
Yeah, I think you have it exactly right. And in a way, he has a kind of fascination not just with America, I think in the 19th century in exactly the way you described, but also in kind of geopolitics of the 19th century to the extent that I think he understands it, which is the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, to quote Thucydides. And that idea that we are powerful, we should be unconstrained, is very familiar in a sense. That's what the Chinese foreign minister said at a meeting of ASEAN nations, where he was telling, I think it was the Philippines or the Singaporeans, you've got to understand, we are big and powerful, you are not, we are going to tell you what to do. Obviously, it is the way Putin views the world. That's why I think he has a much more benign view of Putin's desire to have a sphere of influence, a kind of a group of satellite states around him, including Ukraine. He has a much more benign view, I think, of Chinese expansionism. He very rarely criticizes it. I can't remember him ever doing it. And so then he looks at it and says, well, the United States should similarly have that kind of sense of the Monroe Doctrine, the Western Hemisphere. Again, to me, it misses the sort of central point about the transformation of the international system after World War II, which is that you realized you don't need territory to become rich and powerful and incredibly effective in the world. Look at South Korea. South Korea is, I forget now, 15 times the per capita GDP of North Korea. Look at tiny Israel, which is now essentially an advanced industrial country on a tiny spit of land, right? Think about all the richest and most powerful countries in the world. Land acquisition has almost nothing to do with, who has a lot of land?
Russia.
It feels to me like...
And Iran is a huge country as well, I believe, right?
Kind of bizarre, anachronistic way to look at the world. But I agree with you. That is the way he's thinking about it. You could get whatever minerals you wanted to get out of Greenland by just signing a couple of deals with them. You don't actually need to own it. You could redo the Panama Canal Treaty and be much easier, by the way, to let the Panamanians run it, and you've just, kind of renegotiated it in terms you like. But I think for Trump, part of it is this this kind of old-fashioned view. And part of it is, I do think, at the end of the day, there's a strong element of narcissism that infuses everything that Trump does. And I think he loves the idea that he would be able to put his stamp on history by saying, Trump added Greenland or something like that to the United States. The physical expansion of America would be a great Trump legacy.
You mentioned Ukraine and Russia. We're talking in the week when all that is being negotiated. How would you describe what Trump's policy towards Ukraine now is?
It's almost impossible to have a kind of, again, a clear through line because it's moved so much. He had a tweet in which he said, the Russians better realize, Putin better realize this war has ruined his country. He better settle. And if he doesn't, we're going to put additional sanctions and his favorite weapon, tariffs, on Russia now. But it seemed to suggest that he understood that the principal obstacle to a peace deal was not Zelensky, but Putin. But then he's shifted entirely and enormously in the last few weeks, where he's called Zelensky a dictator. He said he started the war, all that stuff. I mean, the UN resolution where the United States sided with Russia and North Korea and Belarus. So, you could argue that, again, in Trump's case, so much of it is personal. He doesn't like Zelensky. But if you step back from that, I think that Trump, in his heart, believes that Russia has legitimate claims over Ukraine, and so has a much softer line on Russia. I think he thinks that the Russians should keep the territory they've acquired. He thinks Ukraine should not be a part of NATO. He thinks that maybe Ukraine should have a kind of neutrality in foreign policy. These are all...
I super disagree with this. I don't think Trump has any strong opinions on it. I think he just doesn't want to deal with it. He doesn't give a fuck about it. Like, I think in his mind, it's only like negatives. It's probably, to some extent, it's probably really scary since he's so clueless on it and doesn't really understand any of it all. Like, all he sees is a potential to make huge missteps. Therefore, like, fuck it, just try to like be done with it as quickly as possible. That's what it feels like.
Essentially the Russian demands. There's no way to read his mind, but my sense from listening to him and watching him is he thinks all those Russian claims are, kind of broadly legitimate.
Let me push on this. You know all this much better than I do. I don't think he thinks anything about Ukraine and Russia.
True.
Whose claims are legitimate. I think he thinks Ukraine is worthless to the U.S.
True. He's a DGGer at heart. Yeah, he doesn't see there's no value to it. Why the fuck would I waste any political capital, time, thought in my brain to it's just worthless. Who cares?
And somebody at some point persuaded him there are mineral rights there. And he thinks Russia is not. That there is value for the U.S., for Trump personally, for the U.S. economy, in access to Russia, good relations with Russia. And that there's some part of him that genuinely doesn't understand why we give a shit about Ukraine, as opposed to cutting a deal with Putin and getting something out of that transaction.
Yeah, if you think about the countries and the leaders he likes, it's either the country is very strong or the leader is very strong, right? It's Putin, Xi, Modi, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Orban, Erdogan. Those are the people he talks about with respect. The more muddled, compromised, weaker leaders of coalition governments in Europe, he finds feckless, he finds uninteresting. I think he likes these more old-fashioned countries. I've thought about this once, and I don't know if it's a reasonable point to make, but the countries he seems fascinated by and respects are countries which you could imagine having lots of Trump towers. The countries he doesn't like, Europe, you couldn't imagine a Trump tower.
But in that way, is he picking up on something real? And I think you see this a bit with J.D. Vance is going out of his way to alienate the European governments of the moment. America is weighing in on behalf of the AfD in Germany. Their view is that there are regimes that they have affinity with, and that the proper nature of American alliance isn't some unchanging alliance between America and Europe because we're all quote-unquote liberal democracies. Trump doesn't want us to be a liberal democracy. The proper nature is between regimes of affinity, and in that way, Putin sees a world more like Trump does than Keir Starmer in the UK. Erdogan sees a world more like Trump does and Justin Trudeau does. That the nature of the alliances they are seeking is a nature of regimes that are like them, regimes that could actually support, have a genuine ideological affinity for who Trump is and what he wants and the world that he wants to see.
Yeah, I think you're raising something very important. I think that part of what's going on here, this new dynamic in international relations we're watching, is that it's not all about power. It's about ideology. So if you think about what is it that Putin is reacting to in the rise and hegemony of the West after the collapse of communism, some of it is Western power, the expansion of NATO, for sure. But a lot of what Putin has been obsessed by has been the expansion of Western liberal ideas and ideology. So if you notice, the things that he talks so much about are the rise of multiculturalism in the West, the rise of a kind of libertine gender ideology, the idea of gender fluidity, even weighed in on the J.K. Rowling controversy. These issues are central to the way that Putin thinks about Russian power, the power of his regime. And so he's viewed the rising tide and the spreading of Western liberal ideas as much a threat as the expansion of NATO. So notice that when he really reacted with force against Georgia in 2008 and then against Ukraine in 2014, in both cases, the issue was not actually that these countries were about to join NATO. They were not. It's that they were going to join the European Union, or at least wanted to have better relations with the European Union. What does the European Union represent? It represents some kind of idea of a Western-style capitalist liberal democracy. And so the way he looks at it is he doesn't want to be surrounded by those kind of countries. He wants to be surrounded by countries like Belarus and Kazakhstan, quasi-authoritarian, somewhat kleptocratic regimes that he can control and manipulate. And I think Xi also, if you listen to Xi Jinping, a lot of the things he's talked about is the dangers of too much westernization, too much liberalism. The Chinese have not just cracked down on the private sector, they've cracked down on what they called the effeminacy of men. He's talked about the virtues of motherhood and women going back to raising families. So again, he views this rising tide of Western liberalism as much a threat, I think, as Western hard power. And here the irony is Trump and Vance agree with them. And so, for the first time now you have in America a party or an ideology that says, yes, that's right. And in a strange sense, and Steve Bannon would explicitly say this, our real allies should be Russia. And that becomes the new alliance system. Now that takes it further than we are right now, but it's those inclinations.
But that's, I think, where this is really going. And I think the way you see it is in Vance and Musk. In Trump's first term, Trump is surrounded, particularly on the national security and foreign policy side, by members of the traditional Republican establishment. Your H.R. McMasters, your Rex Tillersons, Mike Pence as his vice president. And none of them want this move, right? This is not why John Kelly got into politics. And so it doesn't really happen. What there is instead are these weird moments in interviews and elsewhere where Trump seems to talk about Putin with real affection in a way that he never talks about anybody in Europe that way. Fast forward, you have Trump's second term in which he is surrounded by people who've been spending the intervening years building the ideology for what Trump intuitively was moving towards. And it's not a complete purge in the Republican Party, but what's left is too weak, even if the Senate Republicans don't love it in every instance. And so now you see this, like the war between autocracy as an ideological phenomenon and liberal democracy as an ideological phenomenon isn't now between America and Europe and these other countries. It's inside America too. And now you really see it, right? These people who are more framework-oriented going there and actively weighing in, as Elon Musk did on behalf of the AfD in Germany. J.D. Vance going to the Munich conference and really telling the Europeans that the great security threat is the way they run their governments. Not Russia, not climate change. It is the temperament and the policy of European liberalism.
Yeah, many years ago I wrote an article called The Rise of Illiberal Democracy in Foreign Affairs. And I was trying to describe this phenomenon of countries where with majorities, with pluralities, we had elected leaders who then systematically degraded the rule of law and individual rights and individual liberties. And of course, I meant it as a term of condemnation. Viktor Orban gave a speech a few years after he came to power. He didn't quote me, but he cited the phrase illiberal democracy. He said, people have talked about illiberal democracy. That is what we want to achieve. That is our goal. We want to be an illiberal democracy because we don't believe in the tenets of Western liberalism. And I think that is, where some impulses of the Trump administration go. Now, I do want to say there are two possibilities, and you have outlined them yourself, because when you first started the conversation, you said the Trump people tell me, look, we just want to use unused American power and get a better deal within this framework that we've built up, right? Like, we're okay with the liberal international system. We just think we got screwed. So that's one theory of where Trump is going. And I actually had a conversation with a very senior Republican this week who was hoping, and I would say was arguing, that that's where Trump is going. Yeah, there's a lot of noise. It's very messy. He does things. He negotiates out in the open in ways that you never would by demeaning Zelensky. But what he's trying to do is to get a better deal. But then there's the second view, which is the one we've just been talking about, which is no. He's not trying to get a better deal. He is trying to systematically remake the international system. And it reminds me there was a period in the 1870s and 80s when the three great conservative monarchs of Europe, the Russians, the Austro-Hungarians, and the Germans got together and created a three emperors league. It was called the Dreikaiserbund. And they got together because they feared the rise of liberalism in Europe after the revolutions of 1848. And it was meant to be these three conservative monarchs holding back the tide of liberalism. And to a certain extent, you wonder whether for some of the people involved here, that is the way they're thinking about it. We and Putin and maybe even, Viktor Orban and people like Erdogan and we need to hold back all this kind of godless, reckless, libertine liberalism that is engulfing the world.
I do think there's a why not both to this. As you were saying at the top of the show, it is very hard to say anything definitive about Donald Trump because he actually is flexible. And he starts in one place and ends in another. And he says we're going to annex Gaza and use it to build hotels. And I do want to talk about this in more detail. But he also seems perfectly happy with a situation where the Arab League steps up. He says he wants to slap huge tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but he also seems kind of happy if they just give him some concessions. And I think two things are happening at once. He takes deals. He doesn't want a lot of friction. He doesn't want markets to freak out. He doesn't want to be committing U.S. troops in places where they're not wanted, right? Trump has a real sense that the tolerance of the American people for pain and bad headlines is low. And on the other hand, there is an erosion to what he is doing, right? He is pushing and pushing and pushing, and the rocks slowly give way. And so even as he's taking these deals, he's also alienating the Europeans. Even as he's taking these deals, he's changing the way people think about America. Even as he's taking these deals, maybe he cuts the deal on minerals with Ukraine, he's also signaled to Moscow that he's open for a transaction, right? And so even if he doesn't go all the way in the first deal, I mean, we're a month into his second term, he's sending signals to every other player on the field to reimagine their strategies. And for some, that's going to mean reimagining their strategy to create countermeasures to the U.S. I think you're seeing that among the Europeans. For some, that is going to mean reimagining their strategies, their offerings, their positioning to come closer to the U.S., to give Trump a deal that he can sell here. I think that's for Putin, right? I think that's for potentially China, somewhat to my surprise, given
Trump's quoting Elon after X was invested in by Russia and the IC3 found Meliorator, and after Elon made his API $42,000 a month to search, making a bot audit unfeasibly expensive. I have to assume he's malicious, not clueless. His base was just propagandized. Okay.
And Trump's historic feeling that China is going to destroy the American economy. And, this game will be repeated again and again and again. And by the end of it, by the end of turn after turn after turn of this, the entire system is in a very different place. Not a place you could have gotten it into in 1 month, but a place you could definitely get it into in 4 years.
Yeah, and I think NATO has essentially been eroded already because what is NATO? NATO is not the buildings, the treaty. NATO is something very simple. It is the question, will the United States of America come to the defense of a small European country if attacked by Russia? And I think the events of the last few weeks have left, I can tell you, having talked to many Europeans, have left the Europeans in no doubt that if Lithuania were attacked tomorrow by Russia, there is almost no chance that Donald Trump would do everything it took to defend Lithuania. So that means they start asking themselves, what is this new world we're living in? So you're seeing, this is really historic, that the guy who's going to become the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, has said the most urgent task for Europe now is to begin a step-by-step independence from the United States, because the United States, or at least Donald Trump, have shown themselves to be indifferent to the fate of Europe. That is, seismic for what was really America's most important ally in Europe, to say that our principal strategic task now is to find a strategy of independence away from the United States. And you're going to see other countries do variations of that. And in some cases, those countries will be probably doing private kind of hedging in a way that they can't publicly admit to. The one part I don't agree with you is I think there are countries that are going to do deals with America. Everyone is going to be wary of a long-term relationship because they realize that certainly in this
we're always one
world,
election away from
those
insanity.
don't mean that much. I was in
Yeah.
Australia last December, and I met with a senior official there who said to me, you know, we're very happy to be in this closer relationship with the United States. We're delighted that you're sharing your nuclear technology with us, you know, the nuclear subs deal that we made with them. But the big question we wonder about is we have now put ourselves in a structurally confrontational role vis-a-vis our principal trading partner, China. We didn't have to do that. China is a long way away. We were happily trading with them. We hope to continue to do that. But it has completely changed the relationship we have with China. That's okay if you have our back. But if in a few years you decide to cut a deal with China, we will have made a generational strategic error. And I think that is what's going to be in every country's mind, you know, about getting close to the United States in a long-term. That's why I say it, these alliances took 8 decades to build.
Let me take the other side of this. What are the chances that Trump is exactly what Europe needs right now? That Europe is a mess, that it has not invested nearly enough in its defense for decades, that it has been watching its productivity numbers functionally collapse, that in something J.D. Vance was saying, it is overregulated, and that is one reason it has almost no strong technology companies right now, that Europe was not getting stronger under Joe Biden's protective umbrella, that we've been watching actually Europe weaken. We have been encouraging a kind of dependence from it. And that here, I guess I'm sounding like the senior Republican you were talking to, but I've heard this and I don't think it's crazy, that you may not ideologically like why Donald Trump is doing this. But if the end result of it is a more independent Europe that spends more on defense and takes its own economic revitalization more seriously, that would be good for all parties. And that it is frankly unlikely that Putin, when he's trying to build better relations with America, is going to invade a bunch of other countries and embarrass Donald Trump. So the Moscow problem is not that big of a problem in the near term. And a stronger Europe would be good for deterring that in the long run, and was not going to happen under Joe Biden or Kamala Harris.
I broadly agree with what you're saying. The Europe needed a kind of a kick in the pants. And interestingly, the threat from Russia has turned out not to be big enough to get Europe kind of energized.
Because of us.
Well,
right? It could only not be big enough because of us.
And the threat of the abandonment of the United States is actually more significant than the threat of Russian aggression. And so they will probably spend more, they will coordinate more on defense. Maybe they'll even do more. I think that the fundamental issue with productivity in Europe is much larger than the U.S. or Russia. Seeing whether total factor productivity rises in Europe over the next 5 years may be unrelated, but I do think they will coordinate more in defense. They'll coordinate more in foreign policy. They'll get more. They'll spend more. What you will lose is they will.
Isn't that bad for the U.S. with the EU getting more independent? Yes.
Will be less deferential to the United States.
I think it might be bad for us.
Right. Yeah. I was about to say we had a system where we kind of ran the world. We ran the world because the European Union essentially did exactly what we wanted them to and was a satellite of the United States. So we would be experimenting with a different system. Yeah, the Europeans will spend more. It is worth pointing out there was a reason we wanted to denationalize the foreign and defense policies of countries like Germany. And Germany in particular, trapped in the center of Europe, has always had a difficult time having a kind of sensible, moderate foreign policy. So there were great virtues to saying to the Germans, you know what, guys, don't worry so much about your security. We'll take care of it. For the last 100 years, when you've worried about it, things haven't turned out so well. And I think Germany is a completely different country now, but it is taking us into a different world. By the way, there will be no defense savings out of all this. The idea that the United States will be able to spend less because the Europeans are spending more, misunderstands what our defense budget is about. We are the only global superpower. We are trying to be engaged in every part of the world. I mean, this is a president who says we should be in Gaza. We have to deter the Japanese. We need Greenland because we want to be able to be sure that we control the Arctic. And by the way, we need to be controlling the Panama Canal. That's the way even Trump conceives of America's role. So there's going to be no defense savings. So at the end of the day, yeah, it's possible that we get a more independent Europe that spends more on defense. I think that I would prefer a kind of tough love approach where there was actually some love.
Among the places where I am surprised by what policies are looking like and what the rhetoric coming out of the administration is like is China. What were we told he was going to do and going to think? That he's going to come in and put a 65% tariff on all goods from China. Nothing like that is happening. He's been much more aggressive in some ways with
our allies.
Threats of tariffs towards Europe and Canada and Mexico. He's now begun talking about some kind of big deal with China where they would just buy more of our stuff, which is sort of like a deal he struck in the first term, even though they didn't end up buying the stuff. But I would have told you that he actively wants a hostile relationship with China. And now he doesn't seem to actively want a hostile relationship with China. It was him who initially came up with, or at least people in his administration, with forcing the sell-off of TikTok. Now he's the savior of TikTok. How do you describe where the Trump administration seems to be moving on China?
Again, with Trump, so much of it is personal. So the reason he seems to have moved on TikTok is because
TikTok
he realized
supported him.
There was a large group of people supporting him on TikTok. TikTok was good for him. It was a good platform for him to get his message out. And it's possible sometimes with Trump that it's as simple as that he realized TikTok is good for me, so I'm for it. But I think that with China, you have always had this conflicting pressure, and you saw it in Trump 1.0. He was hostile toward China in the campaign. He talked about massive tariffs against China, and he comes in and he invites Xi Jinping to Mar-a-Lago, and he's dazzled by that, and his grandchildren sing Chinese songs to Xi Jinping, and he talks about this beautiful chocolate cake he serves him. And he likes the idea that he is, sitting with the second most powerful person in the world, and they have a relationship and they get on. I mean, the whole Trump 1.0 on China was kind of a nothing because they put tariffs on, and somebody did a calculation that something like 95% of the value of the revenues collected for the tariffs went to subsidies to American farmers to compensate them for the loss. So we didn't even make any money off of it, which Trump often talks about with tariffs. This time around, I think he seems to be much less even rhetorically hostile toward China. My inclination is to go where you're going. He wants a deal with China. He wants to have some kind of a better working relationship with China. I think to a large extent that could be a good thing. And I think that one of the things I worry about in the new world we're going into, China is embarking on a massive military buildup. China is probably going to quadruple the number of nuclear weapons it has in the next 10 years. That's all. And to a certain extent, I understand China's point of view, which is they are the second richest country in the world. Why should they not have an arsenal that's as big as Russia's? But it can be very destabilizing. That period when the Soviets expanded their nuclear arsenal in the late 50s and 60s, and the United States and the Soviets were going mano a mano, it was a very unstable period. And think of the Berlin crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis. So to have a better working relationship with China in this period, I think is a very good thing. And if for whatever reason Trump gets there, I'd be the first to applaud it.
How have you taken Trump's attitude towards Israel and Gaza, his proposals, his appointments? How would you describe it?
I think what Trump represented for the Israelis was the most unqualified support that any American president was ever going to give to an Israeli prime minister. And the relationship is obviously very personal between Trump and Bibi. As a result of that, by the way, he was able to get a ceasefire because, in effect, what it seems that his envoy told Bibi was, "You're not going to get a better deal from Trump, so you better take this one." This is in the waning days of the Biden administration. But I think that...
but that ceasefire ultimately meant what? Like, they're still fighting each other. There's still tanks rolling into the Gaza Strip. There's all the hostages weren't returned on noon by that. Do we know how many are left?
It's also a kind of ideological affinity to Bibiism, if you will. If you notice in that UN resolution in which the United States absolutely bizarrely sided with Russia against Ukraine, against almost every democratic country
Israel
in the world,
joined them
in basically not condemning the Russian aggression in Ukraine. There were two unusual countries that went along with the US, Russia, North Korea, Belarus. It was Hungary and Israel. And I think what that tells you is that there is this ideological affinity that Trump feels with Bibi both wrongly persecuted by the liberal elites of their country, both representing the kind of silent majority in their minds, both believing in huge amounts of disruption, both tough guys. So there's, I think, a kind of personal and ideological connection that Trump has with Bibi's Israel, and you can see it when you watch them together.
The fear that the people I know who work on Middle East policy had about Donald Trump was that if he was elected, you would have an American president functionally supportive of Israeli annexation of the West Bank and possibly of Gaza. What they didn't expect was any desire on that same American president's behalf to personally annex Gaza, right? Nobody saw, well, actually, no, Israel shouldn't take Gaza, America should take Gaza.
But it's
what
not
do you
even
think
a
that
real.
Proposal is? Do you understand where it came from?
It's not
Do you
even
have a
real.
sense of
There's no way that's
how
real. It's a meme.
much he would actually risk to make it happen? Like, how have you read it?
We have tried to understand it, and most people, with a lot of what Trump says, it does appear to have come out, almost
out of nowhere,
spontaneously. And so my guess is what happened is Bibi Netanyahu essentially expressed what has long been a kind of right-wing fantasy in Israel, which is if only we could clear these Palestinians out of Gaza, this would be a great place for us to, it was a big mistake for us to leave, and it's an amazing piece of land. We could think of the wonders we could do with Gaza. So it maybe came out of that. What it has done is it has, in some ways, given comfort to both the extremists on both sides. So right-wing Israelis now say, and I mean people to the right of Bibi Netanyahu, say, you see, this was not a fantasy. This was something real. The President of the United States is now advocating getting the Palestinians out of Gaza. So all those people have dug in and believe that this is really viable. And by the way, it's spreading to their views on the West Bank as well. Because the right-wing fantasy in Israel has always been make life so difficult for the Palestinians that effectively they will slowly but surely start moving away. They'll go to Jordan. They'll go to Egypt. The Egyptians and Jordanians will be forced to take them. But on the other hand, it does seem to have also reinforced among the hardline Palestinians the idea that, look, the Americans only mean bad things for us. Don't be very wary of any of this, American involvement, because what the Americans really want to do is ethnically cleanse all of us out of Gaza. So they're digging in. They're trying to figure out how do we maintain our presence? How do we make sure that if there is some kind of an American or Israeli suzerainty here, we would launch an insurgency? So I don't see it as having produced anything particularly good, and it has really reinforced this very strong element within the Israeli right that believes there is a solution to the Palestinian problem, and it is largely ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the West Bank.
In Joe Biden, you had the apex of the liberal international order believers. Joe Biden's whole career in the Senate was devoted to this quite significantly. He was known for his commitment to these alliances, known for his belief in a sort of muscular liberal internationalism. It was always notable the way when he was deciding whether or not to stay in the race, the thing that seemed to animate him in that period was NATO, and if not for me, who's going to protect NATO and the alliances? And they had this vision of American strength through the alliance system. And it led to a world, or it coexisted with a world, that by the end of his term felt to many people like it had fallen into disorder. You had Russia invading Ukraine, you had the war in Gaza, and you had a sense of American weakness. I mean, some of that was Joe Biden's inability to personally project strength, whatever you thought of the actual policies. Now you've had Trump come in for a month, and the whole world is reshuffling in response to what he says. So you have negotiations happening with Moscow, you have mineral deals being signed with Ukraine, you have in Gaza, all of a sudden, for the insanity, in my view, of Trump's actual proposal, I am hearing more serious proposals from the Arab countries than I was before. Yair Lapid, one of the opposition leaders in Israel, had a reasonable, I thought, proposal of wiping out Egyptian foreign debt in return for Egypt taking over rebuilding and governance of Gaza for a period of time. The sense that the world is responding to American strength. Did Democrats fumble this in their belief that a restrained America was a strong America, that more did not need to be projected? Did they leave the opening for someone like Trump who said, there's all this surplus power, and the American public is going to respond to seeing someone come pick it up? That the sense that the world should respond to America, that we should be feared by our friends and our enemies alike, had been dismissed. I've heard this from people involved in the Middle East conflict. Nobody feared Joe Biden.
Look, I think that, there's no question the United States had enormous power. Again, I say it sort of contradicts the central premise of the Trump-Vance domestic argument, which is that America has been hollowed out and ravaged over the last 30 years by the forces of globalization and liberalism. In fact, the real story of the last 30 years is the United States has emerged dominant among the rich countries in the world.
And they seem to envy the political systems of countries that are in terrible shape. Right? Hungary, Russia, China, which is seeing its growth rates fall. They have a lot of envy of systems that you would not want to emulate.
China doesn't have a trade deficit, and look at China, right? Like, that's not a country you'd want to emulate the economy of. So there is a kind of weird contradiction, but I agree with you. The United States has enormous power, and I don't think that it is a sign of strength to go around bullying smaller countries and forcing them to say, things that are often kind of rhetorical concessions. Get everyone to call it the Gulf of America. Get the Panamanians are a good example. The guy who's running Panama now is a very pro-American conservative, and he's now been humiliated and made to mouth some kind of nonsense that allows Trump to claim he got a victory. The same thing happened with Canada and Mexico.
But I'm going to because I want to push you to the strong examples here, the strong counterexamples, which is to say that I had Jake Sullivan on the show, and we were talking about Ukraine, and we were talking about Israel, and I would say the view that emerged from him is that it would be immoral to use American leverage to push our allies into negotiations in Ukraine to force Israel to have done really anything differently in Gaza. And that as soon as Trump came on the scene, it turned out people would listen, like the hostage deal.
I wish that people would stop using this Israel example. People are acting like the only difference between Trump and Biden was that Trump came and he was a better negotiator. And they ignore the fact that like a year and a half had passed since the war had started. Like the war was wrapping up. Like all of the like super major operations had already ceased. Like there's not much left to do in terms of combat operations on the ground. I don't like this weird reframing of like, yeah, Israel looked like they were gearing up for another 10 years of war in Gaza and then Trump came to stop it. No, they basically accomplished like every objective that they'd wanted plus more with the Houthis, with Hezbollah, with assassinating Hamas leadership. Like there was always some deal on the way. There has to be. You had cast iron or cast lead, you had protective edge. Like there have been operations in Gaza before that have started and stopped. Like it was inevitable that at some point it's going to stop, right?
Deal got signed, Netanyahu dropped some objections, like they moved forward on some kind of ceasefire. You had negotiations not in the way I would like to see them had. Pre-conceding functionally everything to Moscow is, in my view, fundamentally immoral. But the level at which the Biden administration would not push its own allies and did not act like it had leverage over someone like Zelensky was strange by the end.
You could tactically say there are some cases where, they didn't handle it well. I, for many, many months, was criticizing the Biden administration on the Russia-Ukraine front. I mean, I thought that it was important to get more realistic. On Israel, it's a particular dynamic that you well know, which is that for a Democratic president, it is very hard to push the Israelis to do anything because they know they can outflank a Democrat by going directly to Congress, by going directly to, essentially, to Republicans. Bibi Netanyahu did that to Barack Obama, who's a much more skilled, politician and negotiator than Joe Biden was. And when Obama tried to push him on the Iran nuclear thing.
The deal was finalized while Biden was still in office, no? Yeah, but it's like, if it's good for Trump, he'll take credit no matter how close or far it was from him being in office. But if it's bad for him, then he'll say, well, I can't do anything Biden. I saw his fucking,
Bibi just did an end run around Obama, went to Washington, got the Republicans to invite him to give a joint speech to the joint session of Congress and completely, kind of tied Obama in knots on that one. So that is a particular problem. But I agree with you that tactically there are some places where you could push harder. If you ask me which philosophy is the right one for the United States to have, I think it's the one that has built these alliance structures in the system for 80 years by not viewing this as a series of transactions, but as a relationship. Trump is a transaction guy. Think about every real estate deal he's ever done. At the end of the day, the person he does the deal with never wants to deal with him again. That is basically one of the leitmotifs of Trump's business career. He screws you in the deal and then moves on, and the next time around screws somebody else. But that's not what American foreign policy has been built on. It's been built on these...
Does Trump get any credit for the deal? No. I mean, like, people say that he had an envoy there that helped, I guess, but he wasn't in office yet. And again, like, it was winding down. And also, like, what is the deal? What the fuck is the deal? Like, I don't even know if we're implementing phase 2 of that. People don't seem hopeful that it's even going to happen. Like, Hamas did not bring the hostages back. Like, they're still, like nothing has happened yet. Like, nothing's even happened yet. Like, I don't know. All of it is retarded as fuck to me.
These alliances and these relationships that have endured now for almost a century. And by the way, very few countries have managed that. So Trump, by strong-arming a few people, a few of these countries will get in the short term a better deal. Again, we're very powerful. We're very rich. But is that going to build real trust for the next 40, 50 years? I don't think so. It's going to give Trump a few good headlines. And, by the way, on the Gaza thing, I think it's important to remember, because I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East over the last 9 months or so. I've been to Saudi Arabia 3 times, 4 times. They were always willing to pay for the reconstruction. The idea that the Trump's bizarre Gaza proposal has gotten the Saudis and the Egyptians to be ready to be involved is not true. The issue has always been who will govern Gaza. And that was, the Israelis say it can't be any Hamas involvement. The Arabs say, look, if it's going to be no Hamas involvement, then you have to allow the Palestinian Authority to do it. And the Israelis say no. And the Israeli response is, why can't the Arabs do it? Well, the Arabs don't want to be in the position of ruling over the Palestinians. They don't want to be in a position where Hamas launches an insurgency against them. That has been the sticking point, not the money. They've always been willing to pay the money. And by the way, that will continue to be the sticking point. That is the hard part of the Gaza business, not getting the Saudis and the UAE to pony up the cash.
The thing that I think I'm pushing towards here is Trumpism the right long-term strategy for the U.S., but assuming the system survives the next couple of years, which in the range of possibilities, I don't think is 100%. I don't think it's 100% domestically, and I don't think it's 100% internationally. I think there's a question of there being sort of thesis, antithesis, synthesis dynamics to where things probably need to go. I think that with Doge, where Democrats were accepting, I mean, I have a whole book on this coming up, but Democrats were accepting of huge levels of government proceduralism, obstruction, the inability of government to deliver or be responsive. They became defenders of government. Now you have a group heedlessly taking chainsaws, trying to actually wreck the thing in a way I consider immoral and genuinely dangerous. But I think to find some stable equilibrium, Democrats are going to have to take some lessons from this, right? Not just say we were right before, you guys shouldn't listen to us. In the way I think we now understand that center-left parties, kind of in Europe and in America, had adopted positions on immigration that were politically unstable. And they don't need to go all the way to where the far right is, but they can't be where they were if they're going to win power. Is there some ways in which lessons need to be learned here for there to be an effective center-left answer, or even left answer, or liberal answer to what this set of challenges represents? Is there some dissatisfaction with how the system is working, either from the American perspective or the international perspective, that needs to be integrated, even if you find, as many of us do, where Trump is going immoral?
Yeah, look, the left has collapsed everywhere. I mean, if you look at Europe, the real story of the European elections over the last, 10 years is the collapse of the left. The French left has collapsed. The German left has collapsed. If you could look at Holland, wherever you look, Sweden was run by the Swedish Social Democrats for 75 years, and they're in trouble. And I think it's principally over the issue of immigration. As you know, I've been hardline on immigration. I think the whole system the asylum system needs to be scrapped. And the fact that the left was not willing to frontally acknowledge that you had millions of people coming in who were obviously gaming the system, claiming to be asylum seekers when they were really economic migrants. I think the left is paying a huge price for that everywhere, and they will continue to pay a price for that, because even now it'll feel like catch up, when they do it. On the international side, I don't think there was any such deep dissatisfaction with the international system as it exists. I think it's, to a large extent, Trump's grievances around it that have exploited it. But he taps into a certain kind of American Jacksonianism that says, why are we entangled with these people? Why? The United States has always had two fundamental attitudes. One, we are too good to participate in the world, or we are so good that we should completely transform the world. But to actually engage in the world as it exists has always been difficult for the United States, because it's an ideological nation. It believes it is exceptional and all that.
Is the problem now that whichever party has the vibe of everything is bad, everything is against you, all institutions are bad, will win for the foreseeable future? It seems like no one really wants to work hard and actually fix problems. I mean, as long as things are okay, then yeah, you have to say everything is bad. If things start to actually get bad, then people will start to look for actual solutions. But the reality is the average American is spoiled as fuck. They have no idea. They feel like things are bad, but they don't even know what that means. Like, remember, to the average American college student, like, a rough life is you can't buy a house by the time you graduate college. You're 24, 25. That's like American Zoomers think that their life is over because they can't buy their own house at 25. So if Trump starts doing things where things get actually bad and you start to actually run into huge issues where people are losing their homes or can't even afford to go to school or can't afford, transportation or whatever, then I think people's opinions on things will start to reflect that. But right now, the negative opinions people have are largely just fed to them by the media, but it's unpopular to say, but it is what it is.
That. And I think you see some of that in the Trump attitude. I think the point you made about Europe is the principal place where I would say there was a lesson to learn, that we had gotten too complacent about the Western alliance, and we had gotten too complacent about Europe's foreign policy dysfunctions. And I think, in some ways, Trump's willingness to sort of think the unthinkable and say the unsayable. Like he said, for example, maybe we should make a deal with Iran. He went in his first term and tried to make a deal with Kim Jong-un. Those things I actually do find refreshing, because why not try to see if there's a way you could make a deal with Kim Jong-un? Why not see if there's a way? I think all these things are low probabilities of success, but there is something to be said for kind of thinking out of the box in some way or the other. I feel like with Trump, the danger is not the thinking out of the box part. The danger is he doesn't value that the box we created is a pretty special box, and it's been very hard in human history to find an era of peace and prosperity and great power stability of the kind we have been able to create. So, before we have this kind of Maoist nihilism and say, let's burn the whole thing down and see where it goes, let's appreciate the box.
How does the destruction of USAID fit into this in one way or another? I think it's been, because that got filed under Doge, I think it's been treated as less of a foreign policy move than it actually is. They seem to have successfully continued to keep the money pretty cut off in a lot of cases, even in places where, say, Marco Rubio seemed to want PEPFAR funding, which is funding for HIV/AIDS medication, particularly in Africa, turned on, and it seems to have not really turned back on. Is this foreign policy? Is this just a kind of internal jihadism against what they see as the liberal nonprofit industrial complex? What is the import of what they've done to USAID, and what is, to the best you believe they have it, the rationale for it?
So I've thought about this a lot, because why would you choose USAID? It's 1% of the federal budget. If you were able to to change some of the uploading mechanisms in Medicare Advantage, you'd probably save more money than in reforming USAID. Medicare is $1 trillion, Social Security is $1.5 trillion, USAID is about $40 billion.
And they don't seem to be reforming it; they're annihilating it.
So I think what happened is, if there's thought.
What happened is it's a government program you can cut, and since it's foreign spending, Americans don't give a fuck about it because it's not impacting any voter, and as long as you're hurting people that are non-voters, then that type of pain is totally acceptable.
Behind it, there must have been. Musk and company said, what is the least popular form of spending that the U.S. does?
On other people,
alluded to this.
Foreign spending.
It's obviously foreign aid. You're sending money to foreigners. People feel like, why shouldn't we be spending it at home? It's easy, right? So I think that was the idea. Like, let's go for an easy win. Let's go for something where particularly our base, the MAGA base, and most Americans in general, think this is a waste of government spending. And they went at it with a brutality, I think, to send a signal to other government agencies.
So this guy in chat, the job market is brutal. No one is hiring, and a lot of people are looking for jobs. Like, there are multiple of you out there that think that. You have no idea what a brutal job market looks like. You're just insanely fucking spoiled. But if it actually gets bad, then you'll actually start looking for politicians to fix it. But like, some of you guys are graduating into job markets where the unemployment rate is like 2 or 3%, and you're like, oh, I can't fucking find a job. And it's like, you have no idea what it is like to not be able to find a job. Like, you just... But whatever.
Don't block us. This is how, this is what will happen to you if you try to, in some way or the other, do an end run around around what we're doing. The effect, to my mind, is tragic because there's the sort of geopolitical argument that this is the soft power of the United States. We go into these countries and people think well of America. Now the Chinese are going to go in, the Russians are going to go in. I believe all that. But I think I wouldn't, you put it in those competitive terms to sell it, and I get it. But, it's been one of the wonderful things that the United States has done in the world. Foreign aid barely existed before 1945. It's, again, one of...
I'm not a Trumper, but why should we be paying for random stuff around the world? Well, it's not random stuff. The United States has a massive economy. We can spend a lot of money in a lot of different areas, and for just a little bit of spending, 1% of our... Is it 1% of our budget? We can make massive gains in, 1, saving people's lives around the world, which I think everybody agrees is a good thing, and 2, building the U.S. reputation around the world without a way that involves conflict, right? Rather than, oh, let's go to war and defend this country. Well, that's going to create people that like us and dislike us. Why not just fund people to cure Ebola or cure tuberculosis or help people with HIV, right? It's just an easy way to spend money for free reputation, basically.
Of these revolutions of foreign policy that America in large part initiated. And I think it is largely, the impulse comes from the idea we're the richest country in the history of the world. It's also be a great thing for us to be the most generous country in the history of the world. 4 out of every 10 humanitarian dollars spent in the world are spent by the United States. And most of USAID's budget is food and medicine. You're literally feeding the hungry, you're clothing sick people. I've seen this on the ground. The people who do work at USAID, these are people who move to Mozambique or Ghana to learn how to get water filtration systems in there. They're getting paid $60,000, $70,000 a year. They're not doing it for the money. They're not doing it for the glory. They're doing it because they believe that the United States can have a kind of positive impact on the world. And to see the agency got it, the funding pulled, and these people demeaned and demonized, called a criminal enterprise. It's so sad. I grew up in India, and I saw so much of the USAID funding, which was exactly the kind of stuff that Doge demonized.
The job market is fine, but there's so many fake listings or AI bullshit filtering you out that it feels like there's no opportunities. You can apply to 100 jobs and hear back from none of them. Yeah, that's an issue, but like the issue, it's on both sides. It's like an arms race, right? Because I'm sure to some extent job recruiters are also responding to people that can send out 500 applications using Indeed or job listings or whatever, that also do all of their resumes as AI constructed shit. So it's like the AI versus the AI and like the bullshit on both sides. Like, I'm sure it's like a fucking nightmare to go through.
Which was to say, there was a program where they'd show old American movies in the U.S. consulate. And a whole bunch of us would go there. And I remember, I saw It's a Wonderful Life and movies like that. And you know what? It did have, it made me fall in love with America. I think that's always been America's great strength, which is that it's the Chinese who do these deals with an African country and with the dictator and say, we'll build you a dam, and in return for that, here's what we want. And by the way, you can take 10%. What American soft power has been, we let the world know who we are. We let the world know that we're a big, open, generous country. And some of that is funding.
But Destiny, we should want workers to be on top though, right? No, you want there to be a healthy balance between employers and employees. You should always want a healthy balance. If the balance gets out of whack in favor of the employers, then people don't make very much money, there's unemployment, people don't have much money to spend, it's a bad situation. If it gets out of balance in favor of the employees, then it becomes very hard to hire anybody, businesses have to shut down because wages get too high, and then there's unemployment, and you get into weird deflationary spirals. It's not good. You want there always needs to be like a healthy balance between power in basically every part of an economy.
Plays and movies, and some of it is, and most of it is food and medicine. And it was always a matter of great pride to me that the United States did that. And it's very sad that it's for now at least gone away.
I think it also gets to what is America first. And one of the things that I actually think it is a total devaluing of non-American lives. You were saying a minute ago how USAID is being,
Bro, wow, Ezra's responding to the chatter right now. Holy fuck. Why the fuck should we even spend that money, bro? Why the fuck would I care? They're not American.
Us calls it what was it, a ball of worms? It's like no worms in the apple, just a ball of worms. So that's a horrible thing to say about, I know people who work in aid, like you do. Musk is a billionaire who jets around the world fathering children with Lord knows how many women and tweeting, sending missives on X 300 times a day. And these people who, went to amazing schools go work on, marginally improving economic growth by making the textile sector more efficient in Ghana. So it appalls me. But at least like the Americans who are working for USAID exist in the calculus. Like the administration hates them and wants to demonize them and wants them to go to the private sector where they'll be more, productive. But the children who needed PEPFAR funding, the antiretrovirals from PEPFAR, they don't exist in the conversation here at all, right? And it's always, I think, a difficult thing from the perspective of a nation, right, which does have a preference for its own citizens. Like, how should you think about an economic migrant who's, any individual economic migrant's life would be much better off if they could come to the U.S., and for reasons of stability in the economy, you can't let everybody who'd like to come to the U.S. And like, how do you value that, right? It's a really hard question, and we don't have, I think, very good answers, and, we tack forward and backward. How do you value, like, people we save from dying of malnutrition? The answers have been complex and not always really debated, but somewhat. We value those lives somewhat. It's not how we think about Americans, but it's not nothing. And I kind of think one of the messages here is it's nothing. Like, the value of foreign lives is nothing. The value of people in the West Bank whose land is going to be annexed is nothing. Our care about, the Ukrainians is nothing, right? And I think that's some of the message of it too, particularly domestically, that USAID was about spending American money to not really serve our interests first and foremost. I think you're right to say that when we say it's really about our soft power, we're not truly telling the truth anymore. It's about expressing our values, which is that other lives matter, and particularly if there's cost-effective ways we can help them, we should. And the message here is they don't, and we shouldn't.
I think that one of the ironies here is that I do believe, as you do, that American aid was never entirely about geopolitics and geostrategy. Part of it, I think, came out of a kind of deep, high Protestant impulse of, saving the world. And I think it is one of the central messages of Christianity that all human beings are equal in the eyes of God, and it is incumbent on the rich to look after the poor. I mean, I've always been struck by the if you read the Sermon on the Mount, if you read Paul's letter to the Galatians, that's what Christianity is about. It's like
not if you hear J.D. Vance's version of it,
right? Which is to me is bizarre, and yet here you have this this Christian administration neglecting what strikes me as the central tenets of Christianity, which are, be nice to poor people, help people who are in need, the Good Samaritan, all that stuff. And this was our one expression of it. For every $100 the federal government spent, we were saying we're going to give $1 to clothe the naked and feed the hungry.
And I would have been, look, I am somebody who believes you could have targeted a bunch of those dollars better. I would have moved a lot to public health, to cash transfers. If you want to say we shouldn't be doing plays, fine, right? We can have that debate. Actually, auditing USAID would have been fine with me. That's why I think the message was that they didn't do that. I've heard people...
And just to push back...
Do you think it's a problem that Americans aren't taught much about World War II? Sometimes I feel like we look too much on like singular causes of things, or we focus too much on singular events. The Jews really fucked us in focusing on the Holocaust, but like the idea that like, oh, World War I, started just because of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, or World War II started just because of appeasement or whatever. Like, we don't look at the fact that like, yeah, sure, these might be tipping points, but there's like all the conditions underneath that exist are the reason why these massive conflicts started. I feel like we don't pay as much attention to those. You'll get like 1 or 2 sentences on it, and then that's it. Even with Israeli history, it happens. People said that the reason why the Second Intifada started was because Sharon stepped onto the Temple Mount. It's like, I mean, like, was that might have been like the straw that broke the camel's back, but like, it was the failure of Oslo, and it was the fact that no deals were being reached, and the Palestinians felt like once again they'd been shafted, and there was no permanent, arrangement coming from all things. Whether Sharon stepped in or not, like the Second Intifada was always going to happen. And this is the one thing, But
USAID was audited.
Why are you? Can you hold on, Elon in chat? Just say what you want to say instead of like trying to. I can't tell if you're trying to trap me into some dialogue tree. Destiny. So for your comments on the balance between the employee and employer, does that mean that 2 strong unions can be bad? Yes, that logically follows from what I said. I've said this a million times before. Yes, you don't want unions that have too much power. You don't want employers that have too much power. Yes, if you're trying to make a point, then just make the point. I don't know why you just are asking all these like leading questions. Just make the point.
it 60 times in
Thank
the
you,
last
yes.
year.
You could have audited from their perspective.
Yeah, you could have, and as you know, by the way, that play was not a USAID spend. It was an American ambassador who decided to help to fund a cultural festival in Ireland. So much of this is
yes. There's been a lot of bullshit here, but it is. I know a lot of people who work in foreign aid, and a lot of people who work in making foreign aid more effective.
Yeah, and there is a big bureaucracy, and there is waste, no question about it.
And not only, and I don't even mean waste. I actually mean that from their perspective, I think it'd be reasonable for a Republican administration to come in and say, too much of this is cultural, too much, I want this money spent differently. Fine. I've heard people say, well, what Doge is really doing is zero-based budgeting. We're just making everything re-justify itself. Well, then you would have it re-justify itself based on some set of measures, right? Does it achieve this? Dollars per life saved, right? I know people who spend all their days trying to figure out how many dollars does it take to save a life here. And the not doing any of that to me was actually the message, right? They didn't want USAID audited. Because actually a lot of things sound great if you audited USAID, even from any kind of humanitarian perspective they could come up with. PEPFAR is an amazing program. It was that the expression of values was the point there. And the expression of values of Trump and America First is that we're the only ones who count. It's why, J.D. Vance's riff that, Christianity has this understanding of this intense partiality of favor, right? It's, our family and our neighbors and our community and like out and out and out and out till you have basically no responsibility to the world.
And as an American leader, but also just as an American citizen,
Whoa!
your compassion belongs first to your fellow citizens. It doesn't mean you hate people from outside of your own borders, but there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country.
Wait, what is the Christian concept of loving the people that are the closest to you more than like a stranger? What is that? There's got to be a parable that goes, I feel like exactly the opposite of this. But okay.
And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world.
It's fine for that to be your politics, but to pretend that's your religion.
Well, and he was corrected by the Pope.
Yes, and then
right.
Yes, when the Pope has to come in personally in his frail health before he ended up in the hospital for double pneumonia to say, no, wait, you just converted to Catholicism, and as the head Catholic, let me tell you, that's not how we think about it. A more humble person might have rethought some things. You've talked a lot about
the Good Samaritan, maybe?
To build the international system that we can now take for granted. Or that we got to the point where we felt we could take it for granted. And I think about, when I read a lot of history, what it took to get to the point that we actually thought lives of individual people around the world had some value. They weren't just pawns, that their destruction was meaningful. Because I look at a lot of history, and I don't think people put a very heavy value on life, right? If you had to wipe a bunch of people out to get what you wanted, you did.
Love thy neighbors, you love yourself. Yeah, but my guess is Vance would say something like, yeah, he said love your neighbor, like the guy that lives right next to you.
The poor suffered what they must. And with Trump, I see a return to that moral framework, among other things. And you can make a lot of criticisms of Democrats, of Republicans, of George W. Bush, of Joe Biden, right? Look at the destruction visited upon the Gazans in the past year. But there was at least some framework that existed that you could yell hypocrite, right? How dare you? Look at what you said before and what you're allowing now. And I think part of their foreign policy is the destruction of that framework entirely, where there's nothing you could say hypocrite of. They've been perfectly clear they don't care. I mean, that way it's very unchristian. It's very, very great powers of the 19th century. And, if you're not somebody who's big enough to be written about in the history books, there's just not value to what you represent. Like, you can just be used as a pawn or taken off the board if you just happen to be in the way.
Yeah, if you think about the mood now is this kind of macho realism, where, Trump is about doing deals. We don't worry about all these values. We're just going to do what's best for America. We're going to use our surplus power. All of that evokes this kind of, 19th century realpolitik. And what people forget about that world was it was a world of constant war, massive human rights abuses. The way that the rich countries thought about poor countries then was let's colonize them, let's exploit them, let's enslave their people. There's something weird about forgetting what that world entailed and forgetting how important it was that we had this revolution in international affairs over the last century, where we've moved to a completely different place. And it's to my mind, one of the sad ironies about all this is that the country that did more than any other country to effect that revolution, beginning with Woodrow Wilson, is the one now undermining it. If you had told me, who's going to undermine the open international system, the liberal international order, 10 or 15 years ago, I would have said, it's going to be the rise of China, or it's going to be the rogue actions of Russia, or it's going to be the Iranians. No, it turns out to be the United States of America that turns its back on its own creation.
I think that's the place to end. So as our final question then, what are 3 books you recommend to the audience?
So I was thinking about it, and one of them I think would be Robert Kagan's book, The Jungle Grows Back, which is a short book that tries to explain the nature of this world that America built and how its erosion and decay will result in the jungle growing back, the jungle of realpolitik, war, poverty, all the things that existed before. The second would be, if you want to get a feel for 19th, 18th century diplomacy and, its ups and downs, Henry Kissinger wrote a wonderful kind of history called Diplomacy, and it begins in the 17th century and it goes all the way to, the 1970s, 80s, as I recall. The third would be, again, thinking about this world America built. If you want a kind of a wonderful biographical lens into it. Walter Isaacson and Evan Thomas wrote a book called The Wise Men, and it was a story of 6 people who were instrumental in building the post-World War II American order. So for all those of you who are fans of Walter Isaacson, this was actually his very first biography. He wrote it with one of his closest friends, Evan Thomas. They were both editors at the time. It's a wonderful read. It's my review of that book for a obscure publication called The American Scholar is my first published piece in the world, so I have a particular affection for it.
Fareed Zakaria, thank you very much.
Good to be here, Ezra.
Thank you. Damn, somebody's mad outside. They said honk. What's going on with our boy Ethan? Oh, somebody link me that cabinet meeting too. There is a great irony in iDubbbz's former editor attacking me through Ela, blaming Ela for corrupting me. Wait. I'm quite convinced Ela has a lot of editorial control over Ethan's opinion on Israel, and thus repeated things on the pod. Why not give an example? Why not justify the argument? Why not support that with, you know, some sort of statement? Yup, beats me. He could have done so much to recenter Ethan. Oh, he said so himself, being nothing before her. He said she translates him Israel news. We have seen her redirecting his own opinions of it, live on air. Oof. Yes, I have a loving family. I know what it takes to take care of infants and toddlers, and obsessing over a past coworker who doesn't give a flying fuck about you during the holidays ain't it. He had everything, but he had to let narcissism, or Ela, take a hold of his paradise. I don't know if it's narcissism or if there's some dynamic with Ela that's hard to see, but he's been using external things as crutches without attacking the core issues and digging in. As of right now, he'd die having convinced himself he's in the right. Deluded. Again, whatever you can do to just never, ever, 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 ever address any of the actual arguments ever. It's always just the weird, like, oh, they're obsessed, they're unwell, they're unhealthy, they're Israeli stooge, like, just nothing. What I'm seeing is anxiety-driven tics ramping up. He's been saying his sleep is bad. He says he relies heavily on his antidepressant. I don't think ever tried to fix the root. His lifeboat appears to be Ela. Her truth is his truth type beat. Homie will only get worse. And then the psychoanalysis comes in. Wait, is Froggy Tonic? He's not the guy who got banned from Creator Clash 2 because Sam Hyde was helping him train, is he? No, okay. Was that a Froggy something? Oh, that was Froggy Fresh. Oh, whatever. I'm an Amazon driver. We make half what UPS drivers do with zero benefits, working for the second largest company in the world and the second richest man in the world. People who idolize Musk and Bezos would hate working for them. Wow.
Actually, I'm dead. No.
Wait, is that what killed him?
Okay, I'm dead.
Is this a death cam or is this the guy playing after? Yes? Oh. Jesus Christ. The cabinet meeting.
Lastly, I want to thank Hassan for the professional dick sucking in his
Jesus.
1 hour long video. I wish you niggas could be like that little
Okay. I guess Pokey didn't know Forsen was streaming.
Very much. We appreciate you being here, and
Wait, who stole this analogy from me? He went into the future and stole it. Fuck! You've got to cut everything to zero and then only bring back what people actually miss. That's why doctors usually start surgeries by removing all internal organs and then adding them back one by one once they figure out which ones the patient needed. Or really need. True. Okay, soy up. Let me grab one. Hold on. I'm gonna watch this cabinet meeting. Fuck me.